Hello there, and welcome back to our Orlando time-lapse series. In today's episode, we continue where we left off last time by further constructing the interior of the railroad station. So without any further introduction, let's dive straight into it today. When you watched the last video, you could see at the very end people are queuing up for this ride here, where they were standing in this main hall. But the thing was, they were kinda clipping through the walls and the door frames of this building. And that's the first thing that we are tackling today. We are achieving this by creating little path stems that we then remove after it. So you can see me following this contour very precisely. And the only leftover paths that are still left are the only points where people can walk through. And I have to say that it's surprisingly satisfying when you see people suddenly evading all those walls and that they reacting to all the stuff that we have built in this game. Right here in the time-lapse on those spots where the wall is very thin, I made this spacing a little bit bigger. Later on, when you are in the guest camera, it can happen when you walk upon the boundaries here that the character model actually jumps over to the other side, or especially on the terrace, you can see it where you kinda fall off and land on the ground floor of the station. So by adding there some spacers, I try to limit it a little bit. You can't 100% avoid it. And later on, when you are playing this for yourself here, I would recommend that you stay a bit more away from those edges of the path, or whenever you have a wall there happening. But I mean, you can of course glitch yourself throughout this park a little bit. And to be perfectly honest, I don't have anything against it. I think it's even part of this very experience here. I think this is still one of the best features of this very game here, that you have the option to go into this guest perspective and experience the park now for yourself. That's a little bit what I missed in the prequel. I know that you had there the feature as well as a hidden cheat code that you could enter, but right here it's a proper function that you can easily use and where you also can interact with those rides and those display sequencers. And besides that, especially for creators, it cannot be overstated how great this feature is. Whenever you zoom in this mode, the vocal length changes with it. So at least in my opinion, the images taken out of this mode look so superior than with the normal perspective of Planet Coaster. But getting back to our build here, you see that people are now queuing up for the railroad and they aren't colliding anymore with those walls. And I will say it here a second time, I'm so impressed by their crowd logic that they figure out their queue on themselves. That even in our case here respects the boundaries of our building. Having said that, on the other side, I'm not so impressed what was happening now on this coaster I built. So they clearly wanted to go to this coaster per railroad, but once they exited now this coaster, they did not really figure out a way how they would return to the park's entrance or exit. And so the thing to fix it was just to create like a little street that guided them back to it. But still, this whole thing seemed a little bit random to me. Why were they okay to go to the coaster with the railroad, but not the other way around? And so my explanation is just that they didn't was enough reason to go in the other direction. Since I only had one coaster in this park, it was very clear that they wanted to get there. But since there wasn't anything else in the park, it was their only destination, so they were kinda a little bit confused where to go next then. That's the exact situation where I kinda missed those attraction landmarks that we had in the prequel. Wherever you set them in your park, people would go there as a destination and they would take pictures there. And so in that way I could mark all those important landmarks that we had throughout the park, so the Matterhorn, the Cinderella's Castle or Space Mountain, without having there an actual attraction there. And so my hope for Planet Coaster 2 is of course that they bring there something similar to it back. I could even imagine if they maybe make it a greater feature where this landmark acts like a photo station and where you can link that thing to a gift shop where you can sell those photos. So I would absolutely love to see something like that in the future. But regardless if they bring it on or not, we will have here at a certain time so many different attractions, shops and restaurants that I don't feel even the need for it. When we have it like in reality, people will always have their reason to go in any direction. And in a way, that's also the very interesting thing about it. Since it's a simulation after all, you will see their spots and things happening during the day that will influence crowds' behavior. Maybe there's an accident happening on a particular ride, then the area around it will become less crowded than in other places. So because you have this constant dynamic shift in how people are interacting now with this park, every time it will be different. That's the thing I find so fascinating about this whole journey. It's not only about recreating this place here to see it in 3D space built, but also how it will actually feels like having people here in the park and how they are interacting with it in real time. In a very strangely way, it reminds me to how ants dig into the earth and create their very own ant-like structure, and the same thing will also happen here. Everybody of you just hearing and watching this video here, whenever you are playing this park for yourself, then people will behave differently than right here in my park. And so depending on your own choices, how you set the ticket price, or if you close down Big Thunder Mountain, or if you set the prices for any toilets in this park to $100, it's completely up to you. And depending on your choices, if they are good or bad, people will let you know that, of course. And so whenever you are in your very own park here, although the park looks the very same, the people within it are completely different. I think that's a vital point here, where it makes the connection to reality also. Whenever you were in a theme park yourself, depending on your personality, your interests, or your own mood, it kinda defines the boundaries of your journey through the park, if you are okay with a certain ride or not. So at all times you are going now through this park, you are checking those things constantly. Should I ride the coaster or not? Is it too terrifying or is it too boring? Is the queue too long? I don't want to wait endlessly here. Maybe instead I should go there. So whenever you are in one of those theme parks, you have an enormous thought conflict going on. It's almost like your head explodes because you have so many things to check up before the time's over, right? And it's mainly also defined by the limited time that you are within it. I mean, you paid a pretty high price, especially in theme parks of Disney, and you of course want to make that precious time absolutely worth it. You don't want to be the fool here and waiting 3 hours for Big Thunder Mountain. And so because this place is as crowded as it only can be, it's sadly the thing. It depends at the end at your own cleverness or awareness of the place, where to see the most in the best time-efficient way. You are kinda getting forced into rushing through the park because everybody else is also doing it. You are probably aware of those videos of people standing at the exact moment in time where the park first opens every day, and they kinda drop there the rope and then people are rushing to those rides to ride it as the first person. I don't blame them here. I would probably do the exact same thing if I would have the chance of being there one time. But still, if you think about it, that's not really the way how you should behave in this theme park. This should be initially the place where all of those things shouldn't matter. It should befree you of this efficiency mentality and not even emphasize it on top of it. At this stage, let's be very clear here what the Magic Kingdom and all those other places are actually about. I mean, on the one side they are theme parks, but for me they are so much more. They present here a perfect depiction of how a community can look like. To say it in the words of Walt Disney, it's about the ideals of all Americans, and as I would add it, to all people in this world. It's about all the core values that we as enlightened and free people live after, or at least should live after. So kindness, compassion, that we respect each other, that there is a tolerance to each and everybody in who we are and who we like to be, that it doesn't matter how we look. All the stories of Disney, they inhibit those core values, and so it's no wonder that they reappear now in this theme park. So whenever you are strolling to the park, you're not only experiencing now those stories in 3D space, but you're almost getting part of them. So in the end, very hopefully, they have a positive effect on yourself as a human being, and they might even make our world a tiny bit better. Now getting back to our guests here in the game, I'm certainly aware that they themselves will not feel like that at all, but maybe instead you, as you are just listening. Maybe in the far future, when you get here in reality, you might feel much more differently just by knowing that. It's not only a theme park. When we're speaking of theme parks, there are so many on this world, but the Disney theme parks stand out. And why they stand out? Because there's one thing that connects all of them, and that is the story. The story that not only you can experience in the park for yourself, but even the memory of that same story that you had with your friends and loved ones. So in the end, that's maybe also the reason why people are so attached to Disney, why they feel it's so special. In particular, maybe not the company of Disney, but instead those golden memories of the past, of their childhood, where they maybe read their first cartoon or watched their first movie about Disney. It's this magic that sparkles through, and you of course not only see it in those movies, but especially in this theme park. So whenever I try to explain here things, it's a mixture of improvisation and some deeper topics that I find interesting to talk about, and sometimes I don't even think too much about it and just keep on going. But especially this last part I just mentioned, it's very dear to my heart that people really get this, because in today's, let's say, fast-paced entertainment world, I'm sometimes under the impression that we lose the true knowledge, what Disney is about, what those ideals are and stand for. Sometimes you stumble across some people that have this impression of Disney, oh, it's this kids company, and aren't they making those amusement fairs? It's only about the short laughter, right? And it's of course absolutely not. It's not only for kids. I would even emphasize on saying it's for everybody, and maybe even especially for adults, who were in a way kids in a particular time of their life, and therefore they have this special relationship to Disney. But I think you can't really blame here anybody for either not knowing or misunderstanding Disney. But rather I think this is a side effect of something so far bigger that is currently going on in our world. You know, the times are changing. People that are growing up today will have a far different experience and interaction with today's technology than we had maybe 20 years or 30 years ago. Once there is something in this world that is more convenient for us, we will prefer it in the future. And that's, I think, something that defines humankind since day one. No matter what invention in the past was discovered, when it made our life overall more convenient than before, it became the new norm and standard at that time. So for example, take the innovation of the car. Since then, nobody wanted to ride their horses anymore. I think you can fairly say that people always seek for the most convenient solution that is available to them. And to now finally get back to the topic here, one side effect of that is the decreasing amount of attention span that people have. I mean, when the world around them always gets faster and faster and tries to improve the convenience overall, it certainly has some effect on themselves as human beings. And so sadly, it's no wonder that when people watch a video like this one, that is a little bit more long form, that they could get easily bored or even just switch it off and watch something else. But the essential thing to point out here is the reason why. I don't think that it necessarily has anything to do with the video itself and the content within it. It's just a format of convenience. Is it convenient enough for the current time that we are living? That's the thing. And I cannot really blame anybody out there because it's not them, but it's rather the time that makes them feel this way. This is my explanation why most people on YouTube, for example, prefer much more shorter videos. They not only want quickly and easily get to the video they like, but also the presentation method of that same video should align to that. And this is of course not only affecting YouTube or social media in general, but also the film industry, and in particular Disney. They also have to react in some way to this mentality shift of seeing something before I start losing the interest into it. And that means of course that you have to direct this content to an audience that is far more critical about what they are seeing. At all times they are kinda question themselves, is the time that I'm spending here worthwhile the thing that I'm seeing? You can see it for example in those trailers where they put one punchline after another in an enormous amount where it's almost ridiculous just to gain some interest of the viewer. Now, it has to be said that of course not everybody is like this. I'm sure that every person is different here on how patient they are when it comes to consuming videos, movies, television shows, or even books. For example, especially on books I have this happening whenever I try to read something, that this whole process of reading something is an actual effort. It's not like your average television show that you just switch on and then you watch it. You actually have to care about what you are reading and to stay focused on that story. And so there we are again at this convenience thing. I wouldn't say that I'm not interested or bored into those books. It's just the thing that they feel sometimes so much more inconvenient than so many videos or movies out there. And to come back now to everything that I said prior, I think it's not me, but rather the surrounding around me that made me now feel this way. Let's assume for a second that I would be grown up in the time of the Victorian period. Then I would have a complete different worldview and experience of that time. And maybe I would enjoy the process of reading a lot more. So maybe that's the thing. Because all of those other medias didn't exist at that particular time, we weren't used to them. And once an invention is out in the world, we as human beings aren't so likely to go back. We don't like this process of going back to something more inconvenient. And if that's the case, then I can't blame anybody out there, because it's not them, it's the time that shapes us and makes us feel this way, as I said now multiple times. So as I'm saying all those things here, I hope that this whole monologue isn't too boring to you, but even if it is, it's kind of irrelevant, because I know that the reason why it may be perceived as boring is not because of the content itself, but because of the times that we are living today. People in 50 years from now will have a complete different experience how they interact with multimedia than we had. And if I follow this whole thinking logic through, one thing sticks to me in particular, and that is the fact to make those videos as timeless as you could only make them. That you could watch them not only right now, but also in 50 years, and maybe even in the Victorian period. So I don't care if something right now is convenient enough to watch or not. All I'm after is to give you a somewhat authentic and transparent viewing experience how we are creating this theme park from the very start to the very end, that you see the whole picture. And even if there are episodes that are not so interesting than other ones, I think that's part of it. It's like in every good story out there. Very naturally, there are up and downs. And to cut something out only for the sake of convenience doesn't really make sense to me. So this wraps up my opinion about this whole thing. I could endlessly continue on this, but I think it's good enough for now. Rather, instead, I would like to talk now about what we are creating the whole time. We barely talked about anything of that today. And so, as you could see it until here, we are creating the basement for our railroad station. In the last episode, I mainly focused on this first section with the rounded ceiling, but now we transition to the, I would say, main area of this basement floor. And the one thing that defines this space here is mainly the station above it, because all of this has to work in its support structure. That's the reason why you see those massive and big columns here. They simply have to hold everything that is above them. This whole area wouldn't really work structurally if you would not have any column at all. And so because you have this bare necessity here, or the need of having them, you actually turn it around and make those columns suddenly the star of the show. They're not only defining now the space, but rather they get part of this Victorian style. For example, on the ground below them, we'll see there a very distinct pattern that only works by having them there. And so I think it's a beautiful lesson here to learn how you can transition necessary support things and turn them around to actually make them major components or features of your park. When we think for a second how our theme park is operating, it's mostly about keeping the immersion alive at all times. But that's kinda the thing, it's not always possible to achieve that and to sustain that. Especially on instances like here, you can't really avoid any close interaction with literally every guest that is roaming around here. And so you have to seek for some solutions to keep up the immersion, but at the same time keep the structural integrity of this building alive. So right here I think it works pretty great and it blends in, but it's maybe also due to the whole theming of this main street. Literally everything that you are seeing has something to do with another building. And so maybe later on, when we are working on many different areas, they are a lot less architecture heavy, I would say. When we take, for example, Frontierland, you also have there some Western themed buildings, but I would say that they are much more secondary and that the real star of the show is the landscaping, where you have those Grand Canyons and the whole vibe about the nature of it. So whatever theming is going on here, it already predefines how we can react to it. And to finally come back now to our basement here, those columns not only make this whole place a lot more lively, because we don't have this strange emptiness, but you can actually feel the weight. Whenever you look at them, you can in a way sense all of that massive structure above it. So when creating it right here in the game, I knew that once I had those columns in place, that the rest is pretty straightforward. It's only following the building logic of this cascading effect on the ceiling. When you look on the reference image, you can of course see that there is some detailing on this trim. At the time of this time-lapse, I wasn't too sure which piece to use here in the game, so I just created that by individual art pieces, which is of course absolutely insane when you think about the piece count. But much later I found out by accident that there is actually a fitting grid piece that should give us something very similar to it. But as you can see it, just by copy-pasting this logic around, we almost end here with this interior set. When you have watched a couple of my episodes prior to this, you might remember that I talked at some point about finding our degree of detailism for those interior spaces. I mean, up to the 32nd episode, we were only building on exterior buildings. So as I was creating all of this here, I was constantly asking myself this question: Does it feel differently than on any exterior facade out there? And I have to say, it does not really. I mean, of course, visually it completely looks different. You suddenly have to work with darker areas where there is no daylight. But when it came down to the actual construction of it, it felt like any other facade on Main Street. Having said that, the one thing that I'm still not really sure on is how we deal with mobile interior. With that I just mean everything that is not part of the architecture. So any chairs or tables or shelves that have to be there in order to make this place operating. Now, in our game, when we create that out of custom scenery, it can't really be used by any guest, and so it's a little bit debatable how accurate we are with that. For example, in the main hall of the railroad station, we have a couple of tables with chairs around them directly in the center of the room, and so it absolutely doesn't make any sense at all to put them there, because people will need this space instead to queue up for the railroad itself. And another big thing, especially for this basement, is the fact that you see there so many old pictures on all those walls, and I'm still kinda unsure how we are going to deal with that. In the game there are billboards, but sadly they aren't really downscalable to such a degree so that they would match to the sizing like in reality. And on top of that comes not only the search for all those images, but to also edit them to a good enough picture that you can use right here in the game. So this whole process seems rather secondary to me, and I could see something like that maybe when we are finished with Cinderella's castle or something, we actually have good enough progress in this park. And as I said, when we don't have any billboards in that sizing, I don't see realistically how we could make that even. I mean, believe it or not, but in Planet Coaster 1, we had such billboards, and they were actually pretty small. And guess in which pack they came with? The spooky pack, right? So I couldn't avoid this little transition here, because I think we have also to talk about that today. As I'm saying this, it's the beginning of November, and sadly up to this point we didn't really saw anything related to a possible spooky pack. No live stream, no proper video or any announcement. The only thing that I saw was a post on X asking players to provide spookish creations for a made-up Halloween challenge. And think about that for a second. In a game that does not feature any spookish pack at all. I think you can clearly see and feel the misconception here. Those two themes are getting thrown into a bin, and the impression is being made of, oh, it's the same thing, but it's absolutely not the same thing. Now it has to be said, you can of course create something very spookish looking with all the tools that we have in this game. But the big consequence out of that mentality is that this will put the ability of creating something very spookish into the hands of every person there is. Or in other words, it completely relies on yourself, how good you are creating something. And if you can't come up with a halfway good looking skeleton or pumpkin with the tools provided, then you are kinda the fool at the end. And that's the thing I don't like here. Even if this is not intentional, I think by accident you are kinda splitting the player base here. On one side you have the people that are very talented in creating maybe something very spookish looking, but on the other side you have the people that would like to create something spookish, but they are lacking the creative abilities. And on top of that, the absolute worst idea that you can have now is to introduce somewhat of a challenge who creates the best spookish creation. This would have only made sense when we would have the spooky pack in this game. Then everybody would start with the same, let's say, starter loadout. And sure, you certainly have also some people that are very creative in what they are creating out of all those assets, but you not only have them, you also have all other people that suddenly can participate as well. Just by having all those spooky assets in the game would have allowed them to create something great either. Now, I would like to tell you my honest opinion here. I do not think that Frontier did this on purpose or to make us in any way upset about all of this. I mean, over the last several months, almost years, they showed us how they could turn around this game. I mean, from the very disastrous launch until now, it's a completely different game, I think. I just think that they rather miscalculated a bit what they would release in this year. I mean, in the last month, Jurassic World 3 was released, so they completely focused on this game. From a game developer's perspective, I can absolutely understand their decision making. When you look on Steam, it already sells so much better than Planet Coaster 2. So I can understand why they pushed now Planet Coaster 2 a little bit to the side and rather focus on this. So that's kinda what I suspect here, that you had there so many things in September and October happening that they are kinda colliding into each other. And who knows, maybe there was even the ambition to bring back the Spooky Pack at some point, but it just didn't make it, and rather instead focus now on bringing something to the end of the year, to at least don't disappoint people then. You kinda see that I desperately try to find a reasonable enough excuse for why we did not see it, just because I hope in my heart that this is the way like it is, and that they not rather instead think that the Spooky Pack is just secondary and could be easily replaced by a somewhat sorcery pack. So I just hope it was due to the timing of all those events, because it otherwise already implies that we could see the same thing happening to the Studio Pack or the Adventure Pack as well. I mean, wouldn't you agree that it's always better to have more packs in this game than less? What would speak against it? And the only argument that I don't like to see something resell in a sequel of a prequel, that's not really a good enough argument to be made here. I don't think you can justify throwing away available content of the prequel only because you are kinda branding them off as it's old and it's used and it lost kinda its right to exist in a way. I mean, it's better to have them than to have nothing. When you are going out and buying a Lego set from the 2010s, you also wouldn't throw that to the garbage just because it's old. Maybe it's not a perfect comparison, but I think you get what I mean here. And remember, all of those assets are in some way a 3D model with a applied texture to it. All of this could be refurbished and updated to our game here. After all, I don't know what to say more here. I'm not really angry or upset about this whole thing. I'm just rather sad. It would have been the perfect opportunity to not only get new players into this game, but especially to bring some players back that lost their interest into this game since day one. So after all this talk here, even if you don't care so much about this pack, I myself, for example, I'm pretty aware that I won't necessarily need those things within it until maybe we come to Haunted Mansion, which will certainly be not happening in this year here. But that's also the thing, it's not about me or some creators here on this platform. I rather think it's about the people that are playing it every day. That's pretty much the core player base of this game. And if they are interested into the Spooky Pack possibly returning, then I can't avoid this topic by just not speaking about it. I want to give you here the perspective of a player of this game, also as a creator, but mainly as a player who plays those games since day one. And especially as a player, I can absolutely understand that there is a desire of seeing this pack being returned. And that's simply the reason why we talk about it. But so far I think this will conclude now my opinion about this whole thing. I know it got a little bit tiresome the last couple of episodes, but I think it was absolutely worth it. Now let's return again to our build today. I'm really sorry that I'm not explaining too much about what we are creating here, but I just think that the whole process here, it's a bit repetitive and there's a lot of copy pasting, and so not every corner is so interesting to talk about. But as I say that, especially this corner here, I had to deviate from the reference here, since otherwise the ceiling would collide with the railroad on the top. Now in theory, this should not have happened, but it's happening because the station platform in our game here is a lot bigger than in reality. And so, in order to make that thing not pop out at the other side of the station, the whole platform is a little bit more to this side. It's only about half a meter or so. But this was still enough so that I had to react to it in some way. I mean, later on, I could imagine that you would have never noticed that until now that I told you that. I'm sorry. But in a way, that's, you could say, my airbag here. When you see something like this here in Planet Coaster 2, you aren't really expecting to see the absolute perfect replica of the same thing like it is in real life. That's not what we are on here. And to add to that, I think it's even impossible to do such things. It's much more about interpretation, how I see all of those things in the park, and how I can express them through the tools of this video game. That's more or less what it is. And so whenever I create here something, when it at least looks decent enough in its shape, in its form, its color and its overall design, then that's already enough, I think. Even if it deviates then from reality, it looks convincing enough that it could be like that in reality. Especially in Anaheim, I made great use out of that, since the tools that we had back then were much more limited. And so whenever I had there something that wouldn't match now to the thing in real life, I made sure that it at least looked kinda believable enough, so when you would see it later, that you would assume it's part of this very park. When we come now to the park here in Planet Coaster 2, it's pretty obvious that we have a lot more tools to our disposal. And I mean, you can see it constantly by all the things that we have created until here, and how far you can get in the parts of Detailism. But still, sometimes I just reach, I would call that, the boundaries of what is possible and what is reasonable. I mean, you can get quite insane in this game here, and maybe even much more detailed than I go here, but I just don't see any sense in doing that. I think I kinda found my sweet spot here on how detailed I'm going, and it motivates me, of course, to continue. So at the very end here, I would like to return now to our build. I think we can say that we done quite a lot today. The interior is almost finished. We set in lights, ceiling fans, all the surroundings of the walls, and revamped the floor, I think, twice. I probably forgot something now. But I think you can say that we reached now a progression level in our basement floor here, where we can confidently say it's good enough for now at least. Or in other words, we don't have to feel in any way bad that we left something unfinished. And that's always a great mental state, I think, to know that we finished it properly. So at this stage I do some last additions. I was a little bit disappointed with the look of how those mythology consoles turned out, and I just decided then to go full ham here and create them just like I did now every other console in this park. Especially on this very prominent spot here, directly in the park's center, it wouldn't make any sense at all to left out now those important ornaments. When I did now this little rework here, I was also thinking a bit if I should upgrade everything that I built prior to that. I mean, most of what you see from the exterior right here, I built almost a year ago. And with so many more pieces in this game right now, it makes of course sense to revisit their certain spots, as it probably will look way better than that. So for example, in the next episode at the very end, I will care about the exterior of the railroad station one last time before moving on. And so there we have those very interesting cloud elements, which are even illuminated, so we certainly have to replace them with our custom ones here. What exactly those instances, they happened from time to time. We are kinda had to force now those pieces into it. Although they would look kinda weird and mediocre, still better than to have nothing there. But that's of course always the great part of having now this park in a 3D space, and when we want to go back to a specific building, we can just simply do that. And when we get there much more pieces in the future, maybe by getting a spooky pack, then we could achieve... No, I probably shouldn't talk now anymore about the spooky pack in this video. In a way, it almost haunts us even now in our usual talk here. But to be serious again, with everything that will come in the future here, and I'm certain that Frontier has planned something in the next year as well, this park will grow besides it. I mean, every time there's a new pack coming, it will affect us right here. After all, one thing is pretty certain, I would say, and that's just the fact that this game, Planet Coaster 2, will be far different in 1 year than now. Who knows which packs we will then have by then, and maybe even the spooky pack in the end. So as always, I welcome you back to our little real-time section in this video. Oops, let's not get wet here, but I have to tell you now something. All of those things that I spoken about in this video, they were of course pre-recorded. Initially I wanted to have this episode out by the last week, but I just couldn't make it, and it was so much work to put this all together. Now as I'm speaking to you, today is the 6th of November. I can only assume that a lot of people already know what I'm on with that, what is happening out there. On this date, Planet Coaster 2 got released 1 year ago. So I did not really know what would happen today, but I was pretty certain that something would happen. And to my surprise, we got something here, like a super little update that kinda celebrates this occasion. In the next episode I will go a little bit more into the details here, but I think it's only about the implementation of this interactive ride that we had in Planet Coaster 1. But aside from that, something that completely blew me out of my shoes here is that they literally overnight announced so randomly Planet Zoo 2. Now I'm not completely certain here if they officially announced it or not, but literally when you have watched this trailer that celebrates 6 years of Planet Zoo, I think you kinda get this impression. And already all content creators out there are creating videos about it. Now I completely didn't expect it that they would go with a sequel of Planet Zoo either. As you probably know, I was still a fan of this idea to have one game foundation that merges all those 3 things into one. Then you do not have to develop them separately and keep them all running, but rather focus on only one package that you refine over time. Now I absolutely get the economical situation of them, since the prequel was such a great success for them. But for example, one issue that I already can see here is how are they going to manage now the implementation of all those animals that are currently part of all those DLCs. You certainly don't want to recharge people there twice. So at least for me it's kinda interesting how they are going to manage that, and we certainly will talk about that in all those upcoming episodes. But for now I like to come back to our park here. We are strolling around the whole time, and I'm kinda trying to show you all the different pathways that you can take. Especially this lovely spot here. It gives you a beautiful angle on the main street. And if you look closely, you can see here people walking through those flower beds. That's of course not ideal, but at some point we will certainly care about that. I mean, in general, when you take a deeper look in the save game here, you will always find their little tiny spots and things that need to be added or fixed. For example, every time I see this footage here, there are so many different things that come to my mind that I theoretically have to add or replace or take care of in some other way. And also when you see now this interior here, there are certainly some things that are still missing, especially the big clock that hangs directly in the center of this room that I absolutely forgot about. But what I'm trying to say here is that we of course take care of all those things at some point. Oh, and by the way, something I like to mention, exactly on this spot, the pathing does not really work correctly. So you can only bypassing this by walking very close to the wall, as other guests will also do, and it's just because of the staircase here. I assume that those two paths are too close to each other, so that they are cancelling each other out. So in this case, I of course decided to stick to the staircase, but that's of course not an ideal solution. I would like to fix it in some way, but I just didn't found any way how to do it. I might rewatch some of Teggy's videos here, but I can't quite remember him showing anything related to something similar to that. But maybe if anybody is out there who might know a little bit more about it, I would really appreciate the help here. So as we are continuing our tour and taking a quick glimpse around all the wonderful things that we have created here, I would like to come back to the special occasion that defines now this 6th November here. For me, it's not only about the appreciation that we have this game and can play it since then, but much more the fact that's also exactly on how long we are building constantly in this very park here. It's the date where I started with this creation. The actual time-lapse of that was released on the 11th of November, but you could kinda say that our park here celebrates its first birthday. It turns 1. And so I can still remember that at the very start I made a prediction on how far I would be in 1 year from then. I very naively said that I would be done with the main street and even started with another area, which is completely not the case as you can see it. But the one thing that I learned over this long period, that both games, although they look very similar to each other, the experience while you are building something in them is so very different. And I think it has mainly to do with the implementation of this scale thing. The simple fact that we just have this in our toolset, it already influences pretty much everything that we are creating here. In the prequel, it was way different. Every element that we had there was limited to a certain size. You could kinda say that the boundaries of what was possible in this game were kinda limited by the tools that we had at that time. And so it's the same thing also in the sequel here, but because you have now the added freedom of scaling everything up and down, the boundaries of what is possible now are so much more farly spread. You can create here something so much more detailed than in the prequel. And because this is happening pretty much all the time we are creating something, the amount of time that we have to invest into this is a lot higher. So that's at least partly my reasoning why I miscalculated here a little bit. It's surely also just the process of creating those videos on the side, but I think the result as you just see it here was absolutely worth it. And even if this whole approach here takes maybe double or even 4 times the time like in the prequel, then that's just a new standard how it is. And I'm certainly the last one that is kinda bothered about it. I mean, this whole journey here, since day one, it's so much fun just creating all of this here, and on the side even documenting it in this way as I'm speaking. There's so much enjoyment I get out of all of this. Now in retrospect, I wished of course that I would have started not in 2024, but rather in 2017. But back then I was just a complete different personality than I'm just now. And I have to say it, this whole YouTube thing here, as dumb as it sounds, it completely changed me as a person, to the better. It not only affected me in my daily life, whenever I wake up I think about it, but I would even say that I finally found something in my life that I can be purely proud of. And isn't that exactly what we all strive for in the end? To finally find something in your life that fully fulfills every department of your proper self. That's the thing that keeps you awake at night. Every time you are going about your daily life, you cannot unthink it. It haunts you even. And yes, I even had nightmares about all of this here. And they weren't so pretty as you might would think. But all of those things, they kinda telling me that I just should keep on doing it. There has to be something out there why this whole approach of recreating a theme park looks and feels so very fascinating. Otherwise you wouldn't bother watching all of this. So it's certainly not only about me here, but much rather about every single one of you that is just watching and hearing all of this. Just the pure fact that you in some way got here shows your interest into it, even if you were aware of that or not. And so therefore I want to thank you so very much for being there and showing some kind of interest into all of this. So with having said all of those things here, I think we can fairly say that the future, not only of Planko 2, looks very bright, but as well to this park. Who knows where we will be in 1 year from today, and where we will retrospectively talk about that again. So as always, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, subscribe, like or comment. Consider becoming a member of this channel to gain pre-access to the park, join our Discord server, watch my other videos of Anaheim or Orlando, and thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.